Yep, yep.
Test. Hello.
I'm on, aren't I, Sue? Hello. We're going to start in a minute. And this is Dol. This is David.
G'day, Dolph.
David's
Oh, yeah.
the weedy gardener. My wife
Loves your show.
And you met Paul, didn't you? My partner.
With edging, you get
They need to get your
I know, I'm going to stay very still. If you see me move, Stu, yell. Don't do that, we might see you on the camera. And this is being filmed, everyone, because we're really hoping this is going to be a bit of history, everything, this whole festival. And that who knows if we're going to be around by the next festival. And we really want to record all your stories and what you do and your work.
Well, she grew up on a banana plantation. Maybe that's okay. I mean, obviously their trees are not dying. So on this video I did yesterday, I showed people, and the comments I'm getting back is like, "Weedy, what are you doing?" And so through that, I get lots of suggestions of what I could do instead, like by digging a little hole in the pup and fill that with water, and then it rots by itself with water. So I'm going to do a new video showing people how you do it without kerosene, and also crawling up the banana tree with a ladder and getting the bunch off of the cluster, and with ropes and everything. It took me like half an hour, and then someone said, "Why don't you just chop the tree halfway up and it falls down slowly, you can get it like that." I didn't know that either. So I'm going to do a new video with all the things I've learned this week about bananas. And that's kind of how the Weedy Garden channel is growing and learning. Organics, if my position on this is just to speak about organics, and I'll pass the microphone on soon. I'm not a very learned man. I've never been to university. I left school when I was 16. From about the age of 14, I used to wag English lessons and go to the darkroom at school and process my stuff. So all my life I've been very visual. When I explain something, I see a picture in my head and I kind of explain what I'm seeing. And my point of this is that so yeah, the Weedy Garden channel is basically just me fumbling around in my garden. I lost my focus of concentration here. Sorry, everybody. I'm not used to doing mill. I will pass it on. I got it. I just got it. So organics. So I'm here about organics, right? And so, being the unlearned person I am, and the language is very. I grew up in Denmark. I've been living 35 years in Denmark, so my English is really not that, you know. So organics, the way I see it is like this, okay? Everything that is growing, you got these elements, earth, wind, water, and fire, and spirit. And earth is all the minerals in the ground. This is the way I see organics, okay? So earth is all the minerals. Wind is oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, all the gases in the air. Water is water, and that's the transportation method for everything to move around. Fire, I see fire as the sun. Fire is the sunlight, is the photosynthesis, is the starter of all this. And then you have the life, the spirit part. So we start off with a little seed, and it needs earth, wind, water, fire, and spirit. And then away it goes, it's in the ground. And what it does is, see, everything that's alive is in the process of creating itself through all these little Lego blocks that exist all around us, like on the periodic table, all the elements, carbon, nitrogen, and so on. So something that's been alive is a composition of these elements. Think of it like a Lego, like a spaceship made out of Lego blocks. It's got all the different shapes and sizes and colours of Lego blocks that make it that spaceship, right? That's been composed. And as it's got life, it's composing itself, and it's getting those elements through its roots. So all those elements are floating around in the soil. And the plant is selecting the ones that it needs, bringing it up into itself to build itself. And it does that until it dies. And when it dies, then the process of, because the spirit part of the earth, wind, water, and fire is gone, then it starts to decompose. So all those elements then get broken down again. And are going to get reused again. And the microorganisms in the soil is what it actually is, the little elements that breaking those Lego blocks apart. The bacteria and the fungi, specifically. So the way I see it is everything that's growing is collecting the blocks to build itself. When it dies, the microbes and the fungus is breaking it apart again. And so that's the way I see organics, is all those elements that are floating around have seen sun and they've seen water and they've been part of the system, and so that's what I see organic. Organics is basically everything that's composed, gets decomposed and reused again. And that's what organic means. And if you let that system run by itself, that's what I see as an organic system. That's organic. And everything that's not organic is like these elements that have been sucked out of something by use of caustic acid or different chemicals that have sucked the Lego blocks out that you can then put directly on the plant, like fertilizers and bought fertilizers. That's not organic. So that's the simple way I see organic. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'll pass the microphone on.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you.
Well, that's a great overview. It's covered everything, so I think we can all probably go now. No. All right, let's get a little tiny bit more technical. Why we have to avoid chemical fertilisers. Now, chemical fertilisers are just basically all of those mineral building blocks that we're referring to, and very few of them are actually water soluble, maybe with the exception of nitrogen. So to make a chemical fertiliser, you initially, when they started doing this back at the beginning of last century, they would use industrial waste sulfuric acid to break down the mineral rock of the various kinds and make it water soluble. So all of these chemicals that we use, NPK, have been treated in a similar way, not now I believe with industrial waste sulfuric acid, but by heating it. You heat it sufficiently so that its atomic structure starts to break down, it becomes water soluble. So you put that on the ground, now it has become rather acidic. So the next thing that happens is you kill all the fungi and the bacteria and the worms in your soil. So there's nothing live left. So to keep it going, you add plenty of nitrogen to it. And nitrogen is like the queen of minerals. It's a bit of a whore. It connects with everything. And so it's a wonderful and flexible little tool. And when a vegetable in the garden sees all this water-soluble mineral, it goes, wow, beauty, McDonald's, and takes it all in. So a garden that's fed with chemical fertilisers looks fantastic. The leaf grows big and really fast because it hasn't got any mechanism to stop absorbing the waterborne nutrients that you've just given it loads of. And it actually thinks it doesn't need what else is in the soil, or the bacteria interchange and the fungal interchange. And so we end up with a plant that has very weak leaf structure because the process of being water soluble does not draw sufficient silica particularly and calcium, which are cell wall building blocks. So the leaf of the product you're growing is rather weak. And what do the insects do? They find the weak spots. So they go to these gardens that have this condition and decimate it. So what do? You put fungicide on and bacteria and insecticide on. So then you've got multiple problems. So this is a really crucial thing if you know nothing else or learn nothing else. You do not use chemical fertilisers. You use exactly the inspiration that's just come to us about observing and seeing how things grow and do it that way. Now, your name was David. David, yeah, sorry. What he was saying about earth, air, fire and spirit and water. Well, water and air are spirit. Now, this is the basis of biodynamics. And biodynamics is harvesting and bringing those elements together in a very, very subtle and beautiful way, which harmonises with all of the unseen and subtle energies of nature. And so when you apply biodynamic preparations, let me say 500. Anyone know what 500 is? Well, one or two people. It's cow manure, which has been put into a cow horn, an organic cow, like a Jersey cow, and buried in bunches, pointing north and south in the ground through winter. And when you take it out of the ground, it smells magnificent. It smells beautiful, like the best kind of soil. So you only need about a handful of it. You can put that into a very large drum of water and stir it for an hour. And then you put that out, and what you've done in the stirring and the preparation of the 500 is to vastly increase the fungal and bacterial content in what was once just cow manure. So when you stir it, excuse me, you're going two ways. You stir it and you stir it and you stir it and you stir it until you get a vortex. You get a little whirlpool. And then you stop and you go the other way. So what you're doing is creating order, chaos, order, chaos, order, chaos. So you're breaking it down and building it up constantly. We use machines, or we use another thing called a flow form, which does a very simple equivalent of a stirring machine. Flow forms are beautiful. They're the figure of an infinity, and so you can see the subtlety there. It's turning the water through the symbol of infinity, back and forwards, down through the next one, back and forwards, back and forwards. So you've energized the water with spirit, a huge amount, the element and the idea of the bacteria and the fungus which is contained in your 500. So you dilute. Your dilution is huge, like thousands to one. Now, the scientists will look at this and say, oh, well, there's nothing really live in there particularly, just all those bacteria have been sort of broken down and spread rather thinly. But what's happened is you've given the water the idea of the bacteria and fungi. So you're bringing spirit into the water. And you what? And right, so now the water is holding the memory of these little life forms. They are fractals within themselves. They're mathematical constructs as much as anything. So you've energized the water so it looks and feels like it's all bacteria and fungi. And then you spray that out onto your ground. If you're just dealing with a little garden, you flick it out with a little, hearth brush or something like that out of your bucket. But if you're doing it like we have to do it, you pump it out and spray it out, and you must spray at a very low pressure because you're dealing with live entities in there, in the bacteria. So you must keep the pressure low, so it's just coming out in droplets all over the ground. And then this element then gets absorbed, this idea gets absorbed into the soil and seriously energizes the soil and the fungi and the bacteria that are already there, given that you're not starting with a dead soil. In which case, you've got to do this process probably 4 or 5 times a year if you're starting with a dead soil. So you're coming from, year zero. Given that you're not doing that, you only need to do it once or twice a year. Now, what that's doing is providing huge amount of energy to the soil. But we have more than just what's in the soil. We have the other component, we have the air, and we have the live part of the plant above the ground. So some people say that there is as much life and as much energy under the ground for a tree or a plant or a bush as there is above it, if not more, because there is a huge and varied fungal life happening under the soil. So you've got to balance it. Now, I had an interesting experience when we first started doing biodynamics, and I didn't really understand, like David came from year zero with all of this knowledge. And so I was religiously doing the 500, and we're just starting our bush food plantation of lemon myrtle and aniseed myrtle trees. And so I was going and getting chook manure. and putting lots of chook manure out to stimulate the growth and get them growing. Free nitrogen, rapid growth, weak cell wall, insects. Oh, look at that. What are these little insects flying around, tiny little insects flying around and around in a circle on these young plants, which are probably only 2.5, 3 metres high at this time, flying around the top growth, top peak of the plant. At dusk, you could see them with the low sunlight. I'd come out a few days later, and all of the leaves on those trees, which were sufficiently weak, all had psyllid attack. Psyllid is a little tiny little insect which burrows inside the leaf and eats the inside out of the leaf. So they found the weak leaves because they've been overstimulated. So what do we do with biodynamics? We take a small amount of silicon dioxide, which is quartz, basically, very, very finely ground, and we do the same process as we do with the 500. We put it in a big drum and we stir it. We create order and chaos until the water now has the memory, the idea, the spirit of silica. So here you don't need to worry about pressure because you're dealing with a basic mineral. So with high pressure and an elevated spraying system, you spray it up into the atmosphere at early light in the morning. And you cover yourself up well because you'll end up getting sunburnt because you're getting a little bit of this spray on you and it's magnifying the effects of ultraviolet, high-frequency light. So you can get sunburnt if you're out there for a couple of hours from, say, 9 till 10 in the morning. So you cover yourself up and you do this. Now, I didn't know any of this, and we'd already joined the Australian the Biodynamic Association down at Bellingen, and we went down there for one of their annual conferences, and I asked Cheryl Kemp, I think it was, who was the secretary at the time. She said to me, "You're putting 500 out, right? Yeah, are you doing the 501, which is what the silica is?" I said, no. There's your problem. And she said, "Do that and your insect problems will be solved." Well, within 3 weeks, there were no more insects in the plantation. It only took 3 weeks for it to happen. So it's very important to steer away from chemical fertilisers and look to earth, air, fire and water and spirit. You'll find a lot of those answers around the spirit approach within the biodynamic associations and the biodynamic writings. Okay, one more thing. Luckily, at that time, we met a very interesting man called Hugh Lovell. Thank you. Names tend to be a bit of a problem. And Hugh was probably the reincarnation of Rudolf Steiner, we reckon, because he was the one Rudolf Steiner, who created the whole thing about biodynamics and using cosmic energy to innovate and energise our agriculture. And Hugh Lovell, an American, came to Australia and joined the Biodynamic Association. He used to, do a lot of work through them, and so he would travel up and down the East Coast and he would come and visit at our place and stay there. So I learnt, and Dolph here learnt an amazing amount from this man who really had spirit in his soul. He was part Cherokee Indian and really related to the earth. And he was also, funny story, a chemical engineer. He did industrial chemistry. He was a young man anyway. This is in the 60s in San Francisco. And everyone was making LSD. And they were making really shit quality LSD. And he was appalled by that, being the purist that he is. So he thought, okay, I'm going to make really good LSD. And so he did that and started distributing it around Haight-Ashbury and wherever else around him. And he was driving home one day and the blue lights and the red lights were flashing on his street. And he realised that he'd been raided, and so he just drove past and drove to the border with Canada. And I'm going to move out of this country for a while. I think the heat is on. And so, okay, so there's one little escape route that those who need it know about, and you walk across this railway bridge, which is basically a freight railway bridge. And so he's on his way there at about 10 o'clock at night, not many people around, pull over. "What are you doing here, son?" Police picked him up. "Why don't you come back to the station with us and we're going to find out who you are?" Well, of course, there's a wanted notice out for him, isn't there? So anyway, suddenly the radio goes off in the police car. Huge emergency. Got to get down there. Something's happened. "All right, son, get out of the car." And they'd driven him close to where the bridge was. So he got out of the car, walked across the bridge and spent 4 years safely in Canada. till eventually he got a guilty conscience and came back and gave himself up in San Francisco. And so they put him in jail and went through all of that process. And while he was there, they give him a thing called the raw rash test, which is the ink blot test. And they all got a bit terrified in there in the administration because he did this thing. It showed them that he had an incredibly high IQ, if you want to believe that process. Anyway, so he became like the lawyer representative for everyone he was in there. I think he was only in there for 9 months. So he had a very interesting time in there. I asked him, I said, what was it like? And he said, oh man, I had the best time of my life. Anyway, so he's legally at home again. So I think I'll pass it on to Dolph now, and he can pick up with a few more stories and some interesting information about biochar and bio. Yeah.
Say about the footsteps, because that's really the important.
Oh, yes. Steiner. We could go back to Rudolf Steiner very briefly. One of the simple things that he said, one of the best fertilisers you can apply on your farm is your footsteps. Just a subtle reminder of the fact that as you walk around and you keep your observation eyes open, then you will learn a hell of a lot more about what's going on around you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and I'd like to thank you for giving up your time to come and listen to what we're up to. Most of us here have been in this town or the surrounds for a long while. Myself is about 25 years on a farm just in Tweedshire there, and recently I've been able to purchase my own farm. I would just like to start with, sometimes when you're listening to passionate people about their lifelong experiences in a process like organic farming, it might make it feel like it's out of your reach. I'd like you to sort of step back and go, well, how did they get there? So far, everyone on this side has said they haven't been to university. I went to the School of Hard Knocks, and so my English is probably worse than the rest of these guys, but my profanity is second to none. So my job is to keep it so these guys watching from around the world don't get offended. So if I can do it, you guys can do it. And it starts with a little step. And whatever the step is, and your steps evolve, because I got into it because I hated money. I had a midlife crisis, and I lived on a van on someone's property with no money, stealing everyone's used vegetable oil to run my truck and drive into town, and 10 years without money. And then I realised I changed. No, it's the lust of money that changes people. I want to use this money as a tool. So my venture started again, but I never lost fact of the site. Like, everyone's brain can rabbit hole the heck out of everything. That's the new word, I think. So I surrounded myself with what I wanted to learn. So when I was bored with this, I would sneak over here and do this. And eventually time goes by and you get a grasp on things. And sometimes you don't get a grasp on things till way later in your journey. So if you look back at all the videos I've done, in the beginning I'm like, blah, blah, blah. I get to here and I go, fuck, I was lying to all these people all this time. That's what I knew back then. Now I know different. I wish I could erase that. Internet holds you forever. So you just got to be the person that you are. So if you can't read, I suck at reading, but I can audio book the heck out of everything because I'm driving a tractor, driving a truck, driving a car, on the planes, blah, 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 whatever. I can pick it up. Videos I'll watch till I fall asleep. It's not a good practice. But it doesn't matter who you are. I got labelled as a naughty boy, and I spent most of my educational life learning how to get around the system. I still do that today, but with the system. So it gets kind of exciting at this level when you know the system and they can't do anything and you keep flaunting. But it's always back in the garden, no shoes, not scared of getting... I got a wife who's from America, and she goes, do you know 9 of the top 10 things that can kill you is in our forest? I said, no, show me. And it's taken 4 years to get her out. But now she grows cannabis like a demon. She's always loved cannabis. And cannabis, when I say cannabis to you guys, I say it in the holistic sense. We don't care what the government calls it, hemp, marijuana, medical marijuana, marijuana with cocaine on top. Yeah, whatever they say. And I'm very controversial, so I'm in a stage now that I'm anti-everything, government and idiots. And I believe that, and I won't say it because half of you probably work for the government. But I'd like to thank my sponsors, Centrelink. You know, life is life and you've got to live it for yourself. You can't follow someone's footsteps. And so now that I'm thinking of that, I'd like to thank everyone who's shown me a different direction. A lot of those people are dead now, but...
Like you, love
Yeah, Jeff Moxham.
Jeff Moxham.
And it affects you. I never think about these guys, but when I do, I turn into a girl, which then I find out I'm sexist, and oh my God, there's so much fucking shit that I've got to go through. So you've got to be who you are and do that stuff. So what excited me very much, and I'd like to thank Paul, because he had a scheme that got me into his organic system without going through the bullshit from the certified people go through. So somehow Paul created a scheme that all little farmers could fit under one umbrella and still be organic because our heart's in it, but then still have certification, and saved us thousands of dollars when we had no money. So pioneers, you can't forget everyone, you can't name everyone, because you start to name them, you forget, and those people, you know, it's not worth leaving them out. So everyone, we're all one type thing. So what got me really excited was biochar, burning shit. You know, did a few public schools when I was a kid. That's why I was in. That's why I got my education through that system. Thanks to our socio-economic area, Western Sydney, Mount Druitt. Back in those days, there wasn't a lot of hope. They chucked all the Housing Commission people together and we just all bounced off each other. Come up with, hey, don't steal from your neighbours because we've got nothing. Let's all piss off to Parramatta and get something good. And a village created in that way, in that sense. So this biochar thing, it's like, to make it real simple for you, it's charcoal, and then the way you imagine it or you want to use it. I want to use it to grow the planet, suck the shit out of the soil, suck the shit out of water. It does a million things. Put it back in the soil and rejuvenate what I believe my ancestors might have done a few wrong things, like dips and stuff, chemical areas. This thing absorbs and it adsorbs, and there's millions and millions of papers been written about it, and I found a niche for myself. I could read all that jargon, but then turn it into something that's simple for us all to understand and to do. And I think part of my, I'm not healed, nowhere near healed, but part of my healing journey is being in front of fires all the time, burning my shit off. I used to have everyone come and I'd say, write on a piece of paper the thing you want to get rid of the most and throw it in the fire. And we started things like that and started researching stuff like that. And organics to me is every bit of information that we all should know, but we don't. And somehow the people that want to get a lot of money, capitalistic, if they've got something, they won't tell you the ingredients or the secret or why it works, but they just want you to buy blindly. Rudolf Steiner never did agriculture, never did work in the soil. He was connected to source, and he wrote seminal works. One's called Agriculture, where biodynamics comes from. One's called the Rudolf Steiner schooling system, anthropophilosophy, I probably can't say it right, without actually doing it. So I think back in those days, people had good nutrition, could use all faculties of their brains and abilities to connect to everything and find out the truth. And now we've just been dumbed down with shitty food, shitty water, shitty people, shitty everything. And it's never been so obvious to me. Then I've had about 300 millennials on my farm in the last 5 years. And it's like, I make lunch for everyone. I make sure they get good food because I know they haven't got food to that point. And organics is probably let's start, your organic journey is right at the top. It goes a lot deeper. We've got quantum agriculture, we've got biodynamics, we've got no-dig gardens, we've got permaculture for sure. Being in the cannabis industry too makes your short-term memory a little bit suspect. But the words will pop out eventually in time. But Robin, there you go. I do remember you. I've done a lot with Robin over the years, and Robin supported Jeff Moxham, who is also the biochar champion in this area. And these are the only ways we can get these simple, cheap technologies out to the people so they can become, you don't have to be self-sufficient. It's really hard to be 100% self-sufficient. But if you've got chooks and a veggie that you can bring into Nimbin and swap it for cow and, I'm a meat eater, sorry. Someone to come and work on your farm for a day or two, you know what I mean? We all get old and it all gets hard to do. You need to encourage everyone to think in the same way you think. So biochar is a huge subject, but really it's simple. Anything you light up and turn into charcoal, you can turn that charcoal into biochar, a few short steps.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. I'll see how I go breathing through this. Yeah. I just don't want to give you a nasty cold. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll let you lip read. The big reveal. Okay. Yes. Well, my life's been a pretty amazing journey. A lot of my childhood was in a country town out west, and my parents were very self-reliant people. They grew up on dairy farms on the coast here during the Depression, and they just never had a lot of disposable income, so everything was sort of, we were very frugal. Mum grew lots of veggies, Dad had a milking goat and a couple of hives of bees, and we had chickens and ducks in the backyard, and I just thought that was normal. When I finished high school and failed maths and couldn't do what I wanted to do, I moved to Sydney, and I was a bit of a rebel. I was the only pacifist in Inverell that was against the Vietnam War, and so rather stigmatised because of that. Anyway, moved down to Sydney, and I soon found my tribe. And one of the first encounters with my tribe was meeting up with Paul Joseph as two young folk singers in the Wayside Chapel. And Katie Corkett and Johnny Allen, and these are all my mates back there in the early 70s, and the whole counterculture thing, and everybody's big dream was moving back to the country and growing good clean food and building community and all that sort of stuff. Now, I saved up. I sort of had 27 jobs in 2.5 years, discovered a lot of things I didn't want to do with my life, and went travelling and with a German boyfriend. And what really amazed me, Bali was my first out of Australia experience, 1972. I think it was 2 weeks before the Whitlam government came in, so I missed out on that whole era. But what really fascinated me was the whole village culture and the different ways of farming and food production and, cuisines and all that sort of stuff. And so through Southeast Asia, and then we went to Germany and lived in Bavaria for 3.5 years and travelled around Europe every summer. And where I was living in Bavaria, they were still doing the traditional farming. The only thing the farmers imported onto their farm was the diesel to put into their tractors and their Mercedes-Benz cars. And the only fertilisers they used was their composted animal manures and bedding, and they did their crop rotations, and the farmers' wives never went to a supermarket. They were still making their own sauerkraut and storing all their veggies and food to get through the winter, and it was just amazing seeing this original culture. Because in Australia we're sort of really divorced from that. You know, I had lots of rels with big sheep farms and none of that stuff there. And I started sort of, also getting into the wild foods and herbs and mushrooms, and, sort of foraging for mushrooms in autumn and come back with 40 plus different edible species of mushroom in the basket. But I was, 3 German winters was enough. I realised I'm a solar animal and wanted to come back to Australia and find some land and set it up sort of like a botanical gardens of useful plants that were put together in a similar way to how you find them in nature. My Inverell High School education, sort of never introduced me to the term ecology, let alone any of the concepts, but I was observing these things by really getting to know the nature there. We came back and wanted to connect with what was going on in Oz, because there was no internet those days. There was only snail mail to keep in touch with people, and I'm a shocking letter writer. And there was an organic festival just out of Sydney. And one of the speakers there, this was in 77, was Bill Mollison, talking about permaculture and promoting the soon-to-be published first permaculture book. And he was this guy talking about all these things I was dreaming about, but taking it a quantum leap further, with the design system and integrating and incorporating all these other things that I was interested in, like natural housing and so forth. So I couldn't wait for that book to come out. My husband and I bought some land on the mid-north coast, and I tried out some ideas from the book, and I had to set up a herb farm and nursery, and I got involved in a lot of community stuff, and I was just seeing lots of people moving out of the city and buying land and setting up communities, because land was so cheap back then. But the dream of their life was turning into the greatest nightmare of their life, because they had grand aspirations, but they had no skills and knowledge to actually manifest it. And a couple of my neighbours did one of Bill's first or second permaculture courses, and I found it really interesting how they started to actually turn things around on their property, and things were working a lot better, and they were having to invest less time doing meaningless things. And my relationship fell apart in '83, and I was up here for the 10th anniversary festival. I think that's when I met you guys first. Yeah, and later that year I did a permaculture design course up in the Tweed. It was the first ever women's permaculture course to try and even up the numbers. There were very few women involved at that point. And I moved down to Sydney because I had, support down there, family and stuff, but I also felt that it was really important to meet people in the city, to give them information to make a better go of it when they moved to the country, but also because the city needed permaculture. And moving from 187 acre property down to a 6 by 7 metre backyard was pretty amazing. And turning that little tiny backyard into an abundance of food, where I was almost feeding myself. I still had to buy onions and potatoes and carrots, things that are slow to produce and take up a lot of space. And started teaching permaculture. The Ryde School of Horticulture had introduced a permaculture elective in its Hort certificate, and I started teaching that. I had 24 hours notice to prepare my first class, and I was sort of pretty much shooting from the hip. I met and got to know Bill Mollison quite closely, and Bill really encouraged me because so many people, there weren't many permaculture teachers, and a lot of people coming into permaculture had very little experience. And he saw that, I'd been actually doing a lot of stuff over many years, not only gardening, but building and having animals and community stuff. And he mentored me quite a bit through those first 10 years that I was teaching. We taught the first permaculture course in India together, and it's just been pretty amazing the places that I've been to, working with Aboriginal communities down in the Murray River and up in the Northern Territory, introducing permaculture to Indonesia, to China, to Taiwan. I've taught courses in Cuba and North America and New Zealand, and on New Zealand maraes, and so a lot of work with Indigenous peoples. Also in Taiwan, the Indigenous people of Taiwan. It's just really been very exciting. Through those years, I sort of had a dream of having an education centre that was a living classroom. And I sort of made moves to move out of Sydney. I'd sort of achieved what I wanted to down there. I'd produced some good permaculture teachers to keep things going down there, like Rosemary Morrow. Some of you might be familiar with her books and work. And, by the way, Costa from Gardening Australia did his initial PDC with me in 1987 down in Sydney when he was a short-haired, clean-shaven, bright-eyed university student. And, that's one of the things I love about, teaching permaculture. You just never know where people are going to take it. And I've seen, sort of whole regions transformed, like some of the work my graduates are doing in India, is just phenomenal. And it's not only about gardening and growing food, it's about community. It's about people. And I think that sort of that aspect, the social permaculture gets missed by a lot of people. Because if we're looking at sustainability, we've got to work together. Yeah, it's by cooperating and coming together with good tools to facilitate collective action that we can really get stuff happening. Getting the opportunity to get this little 5 acres here on the edge of Nimbin, which actually came about through being invited to design the first community title. Community in New South Wales. I was part of the group that lobbied for that title from the 1983 festival up here, and we had the big rural resettlement seminar here in the hall, and I worked with Rob Doolan and stuff on proposals for state government that led to the CEP 15. And it's about, sort of good land use planning and good human settlements. I mean, permaculture, the name itself, Bill describes it as coming from permanence, which is to endure, and culture, the activities that sustain human development and society. So it's bigger than just gardening. Food is something that we need 2, 3, 4 times a day. And it's been one of our most destructive activities globally in terms of, land degradation, climate change, and so forth. And so it's an obvious starting point. I think it was Graham Burnett that said permaculture is revolution disguised as gardening. And it's the gardening that gets people in, and then they find, oh wow, there's more. But wait, there is more, there's so much more. It's, just been such an exciting life, and just so many wonderful opportunities. 20 years ago, we got permaculture vocational education qualifications accredited, and now they're on the National Training Register. And now with the last review of our permaculture certificates 1 to 4 and diploma, and it's sitting up there with horticulture and agriculture and so on. Now horticulture and agriculture are saying, oh, can we use this unit from permaculture? Can we use that unit from permaculture? So we're not mainstreaming permaculture, we are permaculturaling the mainstream. And it's really exciting times. My dear colleague Janelle Schaefer, and I just so miss her, she's been working with me for over 15 years doing the admin and also teaching with us at Janbun Gardens. And she just got a job doing drought resilience work with farmers out west, from the living classroom in Bingara. And an amazing job and opportunity. She's got a master's degree, she's got an ag science degree and stuff, but it was her permaculture that got her that job, because they needed somebody who was holistic and understood the social dynamic. And so, that's, I suppose I could just carry on for hours, but we've got wonderful stories here to still listen to, and it's been a privilege actually here in Nimbin to work with the community and helping to facilitate some of the early processes that got the whole food security thing happening, which gave birth to our farmers markets. And it's been wonderful seeing the food security factor improve in this village out of sight over the years, like from the early 90s when I first moved here through to the last 10 years, where we can virtually provide 70 to 80% of our food from within a 30-kilometre radius. And I think, what an incredible community to be in. And as I travel the world and share stories of Nimbin and other places, I'm often asked, Robin, where would you like to be when the shit hits the fan? And I says, I want to be at home, not just because of Janbun Gardens, but because of the incredible community that we have here in Nimbin and surrounds. So thank you.
Shall I talk? Okay. When I asked Jenny, what are the guidelines for this morning, predictably she said there aren't any. It's the Aquarius Festival. So that leaves us with an open slather. So actually I did say at the time that we'll do a show and tell, but I've decided we're not going to do any much telling, and we're going to do a show and share. So on the back seat toward the door, there's some little packets of seeds, and we're going to give some of this stuff away, and so you can put, if they fit, into your little packet if you haven't got one already. I've given out to about 3/4 of you have a packet. And because we've reached that point where you might be going to sleep, only because as an old high school teacher of English, my favourite students were the naughty boys. We are going to, stand up and pass it. No, I'm going to stand up. phew, because I thought, you know, they'll probably try and escape. So what's the Aquarius Festival got to do with seeds? Well, I was in Adelaide at the time and thinking, that sounds fabulous, wish I was there. They look like they're living or trying to live in the third world. And wherever I've been in the third world, people are growing food. So I sort of thought that was the essential part of this lifestyle that we moved here for. So that's good, and most people, hopefully, do grow their own food. We fit as a subset of permaculture. When I met Michelle, which was in the Environment Centre over there, and he really dislikes me telling this story, but it's a great line. I was reading a badly radioed sheet about permaculture, and I heard a voice behind me say, "How much do you know about permaculture?" And I said, "Pas grand-chose," because I detected the French accent, or presque rien, nearly nothing. And he said, "I can teach you." And he has. Great line, yeah. So part of the whole seed-saving thing is about, of course, diversity, but it's also recognising anything as you go anywhere in the world. You end up, because you're so interested in seeds and propagation and botany and what any one plant is, you end up feeling very at home anywhere, because there's always some of your friends. If it's not coffee, it's weeds, you know. Or, well, some people call it a weed. But anywhere you are, you find plants that you know and love. And of course, permaculture is about stepping lightly on the world, which that message is shared with the spirit, as I understand, of Aquarius. Yeah? So the other part is experimentation. So we have ended up growing our own perfume, or making our own perfume from our plants, because we've been there 25 years. And just before Bill died, we went down to see him in Hobart and gave him some perfume, sprayed it all over him. And we said, "This is our climax crop, Bill. We are encapsulating the fragrant molecules, the ephemeral molecules from out of our permaculture system." And he goes, "Climax crop," as if that was a thing, but he hadn't used it. It was 9 days before he died. So, yeah, he talked about succession and climax, but not climax crops, because they're all important. So we've made a perfume called Don't Live Up, which means completely out of it. We thought would be appropriate for here. Sadly, it got spilt on the way here, but we are wearing it. So you could pass it around. We've made about 150 tinctures. Included amongst the seeds that we're interested are natives. We were talking earlier about what can you do with a Davidson plum. Well, we make Davidson plum wine, which is quite sour. They can smell it.
Because we live with COVID, don't we?
So we also... Mr. Rules. So we incorporate Davidson plums in our garden, of course, and we make wine, quite sour and quite difficult to encounter. But we can mix that with jaboticabas, which is way too sweet. Or we can make umeboshi plums out of our Davidson plums. So that's kind of all part of the experimentation and filling in your piece of paradise. So Michelle's going to talk now about how we've decentralised seed savers.
Oh, thank you. So as we didn't growing younger as we were promised to, we realized silently that we were already old. So about 15 years ago, we decided to...
You have places there in
Okay,
the
take that,
darkness.
yeah.
Filming.
We decided to continue the process of decentralizing seed savers. And we put 2 books together that are now free on the internet. One is called Seed to Seed Food Gardens in Schools. And the other one is a Local Seed Network Manual. So that was to hopefully get people to start doing seed savers where they are. Because someone came one day and said to us, "Oh, I can't do it because you guys are doing it. I wouldn't want to step on your toes." I said, "No, on the contrary." So that pushed us to actually put a book together, 100 pages, on the subject. How you create your own seed savers, and why would you do that? Because we were already doing this in a number of countries. We visited 43 countries on the seed trail, understanding that we were not there to teach anyone anything. Because people would tell us, "Oh gosh, so lucky you go and teach those people seed saving and permaculture." I said, no. It was a matter of talking about non-government organization that we were invited by to realize that they already had what we thought we might be able to teach them. So that was the decentralization. Like we felt that people already knew, or we had to find people that knew actually how to produce seeds. Like if you go to Cuba, that's where we did the first permaculture course there, you wouldn't want to go and tell people how to grow cassava or rice because they know that very well. They're the experts. So we realized we were amongst the experts, and these experts had a lot of diversity in their garden. Everyone had. I think that's what it is.
This is a tree lettuce, and we're passing around Madagascar bean, which, remember Mookie and Shanto? He said, "Jude, I've got a bean to pick with you," when he met me one day. He said, "That bean you gave me, like you promised was going to be a Jack and the Beanstalk bean." He was a good, fabulous songmaker here. He said, that's only growing leaves. "Oh, Mookie, it's a 7-year bean. You have to wait 2 or 3 years before you get a really good crop." So that's that first one. When I first met Michelle, or soon after I met him, he was dancing around his garden at Tuntable with this lettuce head, which is what this is, and going, "Lettuces grow here, lettuces grow there, lettuces grow here." And I thought, oh, I'm in love with this guy. So we have some lettuces, seeds for you, which are the tree lettuce. And it's otherwise called asparagus or stem lettuce by Joy Lycombe, who's written fabulous books on. It's a bit floaty, you have to be careful. On all types of vegetables, particularly Asian. And she points out that you keep picking it, it grows to 2 metres, but if you keep picking it, it throws new shoots and they become like asparagus. And we've done that, had it for like 35 years, and it self-seeds in our garden. So imagine having a lettuce that's 2 metres high. It's the best of our greens. Another green is this one, which shall only be taken by people who are absolutely in love with the weeds. This is the beetle leaf, or beetle, what's it called? Piper beetle. and it is an absolute weed because it goes underground just as bad as cooch. So you're not to take it unless you're going to absolutely isolate it. Then you take in a pot, yes, on concrete, you get your beetle leaf fresh from your beetle palm, which grows at our place, and then you wrap it, you remember, and put some paste with it and some lime, and that's the beetle leaf. But it is eaten throughout Southeast Asia as a spinach and used as a kind of dolmade. Do you want one? Please don't take it and let it run away from you. Yeah?
I got the same problem with sweet potatoes.
Likewise.
Sweet potatoes do the same thing. They just like.
Yeah.
So we are growing a lot of different food plants and ethnobotanicals. And we had grafted tree, we grow grafted tree, but for citrus, we also have a range of seed-grown, for example, this one. And it took 10 years to start flowering. Pretty good because we're not a commercial organization. And a few years after that, it started bearing fruit. And we just opened the first fruit that was this year. Yeah. And it turned up to be this, and if you can recognize here, when I say we grow from seeds, every time we'll see some highly interesting citrus, we would be keeping the seeds and regrowing it. And years later is now. So this one is a cross between a grapefruit and a lime, according to Jeremy Colby William. Maybe you heard of Gardening Australia? No. Yeah, okay. Yeah, right. Well, we don't have television for the last 40 years, so he told me, he's one of our director on the board, and I gave it to him and he called me and said, this is it. This is a cross between a lime and a grapefruit. But it took on much more the sweet, so it's quite sweet. There's very little bitterness or none. So, and it's very easy to press and very few seeds. So that's what you can get when you grow from seeds. You end up with a diversity. Either you can have it up with crosses, but you can also end up with exactly the same. And with citrus, you got a better chance to get a true two-type thing.
Here we've done Kinotto from seed, and we have a mandarin and a Bigardier orange, which is a rough-skinned orange.
Small lime, what we call here West Indian lime.
We call it Tahitian lime, don't we?
Is it?
But in Tahiti they call it West Indian.
There, lime are very small. And the one from the Marquis Island is even smaller with a very strong flavor. And that's what gives the raw fish of the Tahitian some unique taste. No, panache, no. A unique taste, I'll say, recognizable. You say, aha, that's different, with coconut milk.
This is a grapefruit, a pink-fleshed one, grown from seed, and the seeds are in here of its brother. So you might like to grow some pink grapefruit. Who knows, it may have been pollinated by something else in our garden. We also have mandarins growing from seed. Yeah, true to type. There's just a few things to smell. and taste here that are the cinnamon. So this year we've peeled our first lot of cinnamon bark seriously, like, you know, it's maybe 100 grams, only 2 weeks' work. But we've had that tree for 25 years, and this is a few of the leaves, which are easy, and little bits of the bark. So we've actually made the quills, because if you peel them the day after, or the day that you pick them, cut the branches, and then peel them that day or the next day, they'll start to curl up and make quills. So you put the small bits inside the bigger bits to make the quills that you normally get. And by the way, most cinnamon, at least in the United States and some here, is actually a different species, not the Ceylanica, the Sri Lankan, which is this one. It's is it acacia?
It is acacia, yes. And so is the Burmese cinnamon.
So they're inferior in flavour.
The thick-rooted one. You know, like the bark one. It's a very, very thick bark. That's the one that is not the true Ceylonese cassia.
Cinnamon. I'm not going to put that one round. So, of course, there are perennials, which, turmeric. I remember standing in this hall giving a permaculture course. I said the best thing you can grow around here is citrus and turmeric, because, well, actually, turmeric becomes a weed. So we've got some very weedy turmerics here that we've just dug out of the bottom of our orchard, but they survived. So there's a red one and a yellow one. There's just break off a finger if you haven't any turmeric by any chance. And this one is a relative called Chinese keys. I'll offer it to the specialists up here. It's Bosenbergia rotunda, and we've made a collection of about 20 Zingiberaceae, and this one is used like a ginger in Southeast Asian, East Asian cookery. It's quite a more pungent, more aromatic than ginger.
Yes, there is evidence that these Chinese keys, the Bosenbergia, actually have got some active ingredients that are good for the pylori ulcers.
Helicobacter pylori.
That's the one. And I've read that on ResearchGate, so enough evidence so that now there is some plan for development. So maybe you'll see either synthetic molecule on the model of this molecule, or possibly the real thing that is being made into pills.
And Helicobacter is a precursor in your stomach bacteria to ulcers. Yes. So, have you seen a blue banana? Ooh. We have a massive bunch, probably because we put too much chicken manure on it. And it's like more than we can eat. We have to share with the neighbours now, which is part of the COVID strategy. And this one can be used green or blue as a, starch. So you cook it, not much flavour, a bit like taro. Or it goes through to something a bit like a creme caramel. And this one is one of our perfume plants. Do you recognise it? Elephant ear. So, elephant ear you don't want to eat, but it has the most beautiful perfume and flowers in August, September, and it grows in your creek. You'd have them, wouldn't you?
So it's got its name Brisbane.
Yeah, Alocasia brisbanensis. Who would like to make perfume? The blue banana doesn't have seed. The answer, and the official answer, is you cannot share bananas with anyone because of the disease problem amongst the industry.
We talk about the planting material.
Of course, you have to do it by those things that you cut out, weed man. So
From the Department of Agriculture.
we have 10 types of bananas, and including a red one as well. And we got them from Nana Glen.
It's in Kopsabel, and that's the true name. Nana. What is that?
I've got a couple of more points. When you make perfumes, such as from that alocasia, you make it with an enfleurage system with shea butter on a flat plate and absorb the fragrant molecules into the fat. In the old days, they did it with beef and pig fat, but we do it with shea butter. Then you derive the fragrance from the shea butter with alcohol to make the perfume I showed earlier. So that elephant ear perfume is very sweet. But if you're using barks, roots, seeds, or any other fibrous type material, you'll put and leaves, and you'll put those into alcohol just to make a tincture directly. So when you make tinctures, you suddenly find you've got things that you can actually drink as liqueurs, like all of the herbs from the garden, sage and thyme and so forth. And if you read the ingredients of some of the most expensive liqueurs around, you'll find that they contain things that are in your garden. Coriander seed, for example, in gin. And so you can make your own liqueur, which we have. And something we collect when we go up to Tenterfield is hawthorn berries, which are edible. They used to make jam from them. And that has the most sweet taste, and now it turns out it's good for blood pressure. Whoopee! And heart. And also medicines. So that's that example. We've got making our own medicines. When we travel to see the family in France, we pick arnica and wild thyme and calendula in Romania in order to make our own mixes of tinctures.
And we tincture them on the spot and recharge the tincture. So it's not just one until you reach a certain, like 35 degrees, and then you
Below 35 is not good.
Yeah, that's right, because it will not keep. But that's a way to bring in some medicinals. Because you can bring up to 3 months supply of herbal medicine.
2 minutes.
Okay.
So
This is the
fibres.
yeah. So that's the Burmese bayur, and we had that tree growing for quite a number of years in our that we planted, and never done really anything with it until I was in Burma about 15 years ago, and I realized that people were using this leaf for curing the tobacco on it, actually. That's how tobacco was sold and cured. So, but what Indians do with that, they make their little, with cassava glue, made of cassava, they make little plates out of it. You may have seen that years ago in India, before plastic was so omnipresent. So what we do with that, it's strong enough, and we give it a shape for when it dries, and we end up...
When it's green.
When it's green, yes, and we end up with containers, and we often eat on it in the gardens. So it's a very convenient throw away to the compostable, useful plant.
Burmese bayur, B-A-Y-U-R. I don't remember the botanical name.
In Burma, I noticed that people cut their bayur very, very low so they can harvest it.
Which is what we're doing with most of our trees now. We're pollarding them so that we don't have to climb a ladder.
Everyone does that.
two more small points. So we're getting back to the seeds. If I give any message to people, I'd say try and make your soil into your seed bank. So you might remove the weeds you don't want and just keep the ones you love, that you're making your medicines, tinctures, salads and whatever out of. And you let things like that tree lettuce that's gone around float into every corner of your garden so that you don't ever run out of greens to eat. And basically you become a forager like a third world person, like the Aquarius Festival, I think, was aiming at. And the next point is that the semi-cultivated areas are also part of that story. You know, it's not just vegetables in serried ranks. It's things that grow around the edges. And that way you're turning into a third world person because you're foraging all the time.
Paul is ready. No, okay. Ah, great, yes. Okay, thanks very much for your patience.
Thank you to everyone for that. And I think what I'd like to do now is firstly share some little thing with you personally, and that is that Paul and I distill lemon myrtle organic oil at our farm, and we've got a lavender still. We've had it for a great number of years now, and we do the distillation process, and we make beautiful lemon myrtle and aniseed myrtle oil, and we grow Davison plums. But I just wanted to share something with you about the lemon myrtle oil. I'm probably incredibly susceptible to getting COVID. I've got a heart condition, I've got quite a few things, lung condition that would maybe make me quite susceptible to it. I haven't had it, even though I've had people at my house with it, I've had people coming down with it, I've been in conversation about an inch away for a whole weekend with people, you know, who've come down with it the next day. I haven't got it, and I thought I'd be a sitting duck to get it, and I haven't, touch wood. But we use our lemon myrtle oil like this, like Vicks Vapor Rub if you've got a cold. We put about 3 or 4 drops in a glass or a cup, you know, a ceramic cup full of boiling water, and we put about 3 or 4 drops only, because it's very strong, into that cup, and you just breathe it in as close as you can stand it. At the beginning it'll be terrible because it's really hurting your lungs and your sinuses, but that's probably the best part. And then it gets a little bit less painful, and you just keep doing it until it's pretty much evaporated and not any point. So every time we feel like we've been in a dangerous situation and a bit close to it, that's what we've done. I'm not saying it's proven, but we've found it really very good for us. So Paul did get COVID for 2 days once, but it was very understandable because his brother had just died, and we were with a relative that had it, and he was at a very weak point. But other than that, we've been very lucky with it, and I just want to share that with you because I believe it's an extraordinarily medicinal oil that can help you all. So I just wanted to go on now to take personalities out of it. It's not our journey, but what we've learned too. And between us all, we've got over 200 years of experience of this, organic gardening in various forms. And I'd like people to share most difficult part, which is how you start. How do you start? You see this block of land. In our case, with Paul and I, our land was very, very damaged. I wondered why Paul wanted to buy it, the farm. I couldn't believe it. It had been used in the Second World War. The trees had been cut down. It had been used, all the trees were put in a brick pit at the beginning of the farm. They were turned into charcoal to run the bus in the Second World War. We've got a little cabin on our place where the internees lived who did that. And plus then it was taken over by very poor dairy farmers who completely overgrazed it, ate it out, and when we bought it, the grass didn't grow for 4 years. So we were starting at a very, very poor point, and I couldn't work out why Paul wanted it. And if you saw it today, although we've had a fair few achievements in our life, we both look at it as the greatest achievement of our life, that we've been able to repair and restore to a great degree this 150 acres that we somehow managed to get back then 40 years ago. So I'd like these people here to share, what do you do when you look at that block or that garden that's just there with nothing, and share their experience of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, how many people here, just hands up, have a vegetable garden already? Easier for me to see. Who does not have food growing at home? 2 people? So I'm addressing those 2 people. Get yourself a shovel, get yourself a wheelbarrow. So how do you start the process of making your own food in your own land? That's the question. Well, that's what I did. I got myself a shovel and a wheelbarrow. I don't know how to answer that question. You just... You take it off.
Okay, you've got your wheelbarrow and your shovel, and you've turned the soil over and you've loosened it all up, and you've gone and bought your seedlings from Bunnings and you put them in, they don't grow. What the hell's gone wrong? Okay, the first thing you probably need to do, not knowing anything, is to get a pH tester of some sort. You can go online and get a really cute little electronic one from Japan, which Dolph gave me once. It's got several different dissimilar metals, and it will give you a very instant readout on what the pH is. Or you can go to Bunnings and you can buy a little test kit, which takes a few minutes, and you mix it up and you put water in it, and it gives you a different set of colours. And that's the other way of doing it, probably the cheaper way of doing it. But if your pH isn't right, then the things aren't going to grow very well. Now, we had that experience in our garden. We've just come through this terrible wet season, and the gardens get waterlogged, and then they turn acidic. The pH drops. It went, in our case, down below 5, in the high 4s, mid 4s. The ideal pH is 6.5. You've got to get your soil to close to 6.5, and then you'll start to see that things will be more reliably growing. Once you've got your pH right, then you can start adding different kinds of stimulants like organic fertilisers and things, or even use seaweed sprays. Seaweed is a great energiser for the soil. It has all sorts of bio and trace elements in it, which is a really good way of getting it going. And once you've got things growing, then every 2 weeks you can give a very dilute spray, like 1 gram per litre of dried seaweed or powder, or you can buy the Maxi-Crop, which is available in its liquid. The one problem with Maxi-Crop is that it's been denatured to a certain degree, because if you put this very live substance into a container and then seal it up and try to sell it, it's likely to burst. So they denature it. They take a lot of the enzyme and the energy out of it, so it becomes more stable to sell as a liquid. So the trick is to go and buy, particularly Nutritech Solutions, a very good brand of dry powdered seaweed, and it's very economical. For a 1 kilo container will last you several years, 1 gram per litre, and it really gives your leaf vegetables a boost. It gets them going. So would you like to add something now about charcoal and how that benefits biology?
Yeah, just before you go, I'd like Paul to just tell people what happened when we started to do our plantation. How did we do it?
How did we do it? Yeah, all right. Well, it was hard work. We were dealing with weedy, very grassy. Now the grass is growing after 20 years. We'd been there before we started to actually put our bush food plantation in. And I could have gone and got Roundup and sprayed the soil where the rows were going to be, but I didn't. We cultivated, and for about a year I nearly killed myself weeding it and turning the soil and adding stuff to it. And at exactly that time we decided to go into a partnership with the Forestry Commission, as it was called then, because they were doing things that we'd suggested to them quite a few years ago after the Terania rainforest dispute. People were saying, well, why aren't you using degraded and unused forest farmland to plant trees on? So they eventually took that up, and we did a thing called joint venture forestry. And in the process of setting that up, the bulldozer came, and he said, they were very generous to us. They said, oh, if you want to use the bulldozer for a day, then that's okay. And so he had this huge deep ripper on the back of it, and he went around and we set up where the rows were to be. 900 down into the ground, heavy clay soil underneath, a little bit of clay underneath, a little bit of topsoil that was there, and the whole ground would erupt between the tracks of this thing. So it broke all the clay up. Then I went around and I think I put 15 tonnes of rock dust down the fissures. So there's a big fissure in the soil now, and rock dust, which is a very great way, a really good way of getting mineral activity going in the soil, and then legumes, cowpeas and things for another season, and then we planted the trees onto that. Well, we turned the cowpeas in, so it was, a nice organic material in the topsoil, and the trees then had the opportunity to go right down into the clay and benefit from the deep ground. Now, when we have very, very dry seasons, the trees don't even notice. They've got a nice deep taproot space to go down, which stayed long enough for them to survive. Of course, that won't be there now, but the trees are well established and they're pretty durable, they're pretty hardy. Now, I was going to talk about something else, but I can't remember. Oh yeah, well, you do all the things that you would expect to do. You mulch them heavily to keep the weed away. The trees are still small. I was doing the biodynamic sprays. That helped them to keep growing. I was using a lot of cardboard. I would drive my ute into town and go around to the panel beater shops and things like doors and bonnets and boots and things like that. Great big pieces of cardboard. So I would lay that down on the ground with some, slow release type of organic fertiliser underneath it and cover it, hold it down. Anyway, that was fine, except when the big winds come, I'd find a great big pile of cardboard sitting over there and I'd have to put it all back again. But that really helped the trees get going without the grasses coming back on. Ceterias is a nasty, huge, enveloping grass which is prolific around here. It comes from South Africa. And so I had to get the Ceteria out of the way. Cows love Ceteria. It fruits, it seeds like crazy, it's everywhere. So I had to get that back, and the cardboard did that job and let the trees get going. And looking after the pH, lots of dolomite and lots of gypsum to help break the clay up. Now I don't have to do any of that. The trees are well and truly established. I just harvest them and they keep growing. I'm a bit of a lazy farmer like that. Anyway, the other really important thing, which we haven't get to talk about, is how to make and the benefits, the subtleties that are contained within charcoal. A square centimetre of charcoal, well-made charcoal, there's an emphasis on well-made. If you were to open it out, the surface area of a piece of charcoal would cover a football field. Now, what does that mean? What it means is, as Dolph calls it, condominiums for fungi and bacteria and water and moisture. So it's the greatest moisture holding bacterial and fungal homes for things in the soil. I'm going to give this to Dolph now because I want him to expand on that a bit.
Thank you, Paulie.
Can I ask you a question, Dolph, actually?
Yes, Mr. Weedy Garden.
Is it such that you got a little bit of charcoal? Is it such that the charcoal, the little crevices in the charcoal are actually homes to the bacteria, so the bacteria take refuge in there and live in there and don't get washed away?
Eventually, yes.
Yeah?
First thing you got to understand about the plant that we get the charcoal from is spent its life sucking everything in from the atmosphere. Then it dies. Eventually, it can rot away, go into the atmosphere via oxidation from the sun and back into the worms and so on and so forth. It takes a long time. Where we step in is we grab that dead wood, put it in a biochar system, a symbol of which I've named after my mentor Jeff Moxham, the Moxham, and we use the flame curtain to keep all the bad stuff from coming out. Anything that's flammable, gases lighter than air will go up, hit the flames, burn, turn into smaller molecules, end up being back in the charcoal. Charcoal lasts the longest because it's the hardest to cook. It's 2800 degrees to burn carbon into ash, and the ash is left behind if you don't follow and tend your fire properly. So the idea of making biochar is to turn that stuff, instead of going back in the atmosphere, turn it into more fire to turn that into charcoal. Now that charcoal is basically that plant without everything it's sucked in. So now it goes into cation and anion exchange as a positive negative chemistry talk. to suck things back in. So if you throw raw charcoal in your garden, it's going to compete with all your plants for any nutrients until it's sated. And that could take 4 years. So what you want to do is supercharge your biochar by giving all the goodness that you want to go to the plant to the charcoal, and then once the charcoal's ready, could be as quickly as 2 weeks, then give it. It will no longer compete with the nutrients, and it hands out the nutrients as the microbes move in. So like Polly was saying, it's like a free condominium with a mini bar for anyone who wants to live in there, and eventually they do. And, you know, like everything biological, we have waste, but their waste is sort of like a mineral, a soluble mineral, and then the fungus will come and say, here's some sugar from the plant, we'll swap your sugar for your toiletries. Oh, great deal. And then all of a sudden, their flats or their condominium they live in is now a service department. And so all of a sudden, this is the perfect place for growth. We're going to have millions of family, and those family are working miners for the plant's nutritional needs. The plant can do a certain amount, then with fungus can do a little bit further, then with bacteria. So we're trying to make villages. So any kind of nutrient, from, well, as far as the largest fungi patches in America, and it's like 4 states long, and they can stick a needle in one end and a needle at the other end, and it goes, ouch. It's the same organism. So it's taking food from miles around. It's not just where you're giving. So going back to the start, whereas what would I do starting an organic garden, is I watch nature. She is the teacher. Everything she does in her time frame, which her time frame, a blink of an eye, we're dead. It's 100 years have gone past like that. So if you look at what she does and trying to mimic what she does, and then put it into a whole lot of these systems that everyone has come up with, then we are hastening it up so we can see good veggies in our lifetime, in a week, in 6 weeks, in whatever. Good nutritional food starts with seeds, and seeds, when they sprout, have all the nutrition in 100-fold than what the eventual veggie becomes. So you could live on eating seeds if you chose right. But all that is a lot of research, and we usually only go down that way when someone says, oh, there's going to be an atomic war, what would you do? Oh, well, there is going to be one, but, you know, who knows when. Well, I would do this, I would do that. Well, most of yous would die, and I'd hunt around for the vegans because they'd be the cleanest meat that's left behind. And that sort of black humour comes from your mentor, Bill Mollison. You know, some of the jokes he came up with was so incredible to keep you passionate about what you're doing. Nobody really knows what they want to do in life until they've done it, and you look back and you go, well, that's really not what I wanted to do. But to start a little veggie garden, if all else fails and you've got money, you go, okay, I'll take the seedling. Okay, I'll take a bag of fert. Okay, I'll take a big bucket. Okay, now what do? Put it all together and water it daily. And very shortly, you come up with problems. And then you reach out. Oh, why is my plant doing like that? There's a lot of great seedling guys around here. When I say guys, I mean girls, boys, transgenders, whatever you want to call yourself these days. People, really. I told you I was controversial. It's just the old age. Everyone has a skill, so ask someone. There's fantastic little markets around here. Blue Knob Market, we used to have every Sunday, well, Saturday, fantastic talks, like 100 people in a room. Someone exceptional, like, well, the first one popped in my head, the Stu from the poo. He used to teach us about poo and stuff when poo wasn't that palatable, is the word. These people have their own vision and their own energy they've put into it. So don't always just believe anyone. Just don't trust them. Just listen to their idea and go and do your own research, because the person behind the microphone could be mad, and you guys might listen and use my lemmings, and I take you off the cliff, and it's like, you never know. So back to charcoal, and I get like this when I haven't had enough coffee. It really makes a shitty gardener a great gardener. because it will hold everything separate into little storage facilities and let the microbes do it. So all you have to do is have patience. You make it, you throw it in, or you make it, you supercharge it, and then you throw it in, and then you watch your plants take up from there. I have 5 or 6 methods I do now, but one of the good ones to teach you to look at everything is holistic land management. And that's basically, if you've ever heard Alan Savory, you get a bunch of elephants and they eat everything, then you move them onto the next paddock and that stuff grows, and then finally they come back and they've got a salad bar that's really good because of their poo, because of the way they've scratched the soil, because of a whole lot of things. We as people don't do that. We get 100 cows and we stick them in a paddock and they smash everything, nothing grows, the ground becomes crap, they die, and their family have a hard time selling the land because it's crap. If you look at nature, everything she touched, if we weren't here, this whole of Australia would be a forest and it'd be impenetrable. And it's easy to say on my farm when you just say lantana. It wasn't there yesterday. How the heck is it there today? So when your soil is right, your veggies will grow. So veggies being bacterially dominated soil needers, right up to, say, trees, which are fungal dominated. They need to be fed by fungus. And in between, my plant of choice, all farmers look for the golden crop. And here in Nimbin, thanks to Nimbin, I found one called cannabis, and it's about 30-to-1 fungal dominant. So no one person can start from scratch and become the best in a week or 2 weeks or a month or 3 months. There's so much stuff you've got to learn. So there's so many people around here that can sort of give you an idea and then you can start. But documentation and observation is really crucial. And then we have the original custodians of this land say things like this: you need to sweat, pee, poo, bleed, vomit, everything on your land, so your land knows who you are and knows how to work with you. And that information was given to me a long time ago when I first came here, but then later on I learnt the Anastasia ringing cedars of Russia books, and they talk all sorts of the same stuff, but it's coming from a different country. So if enough people say it's right, it becomes right until you research it properly. So you've just got to find something that makes you passionate about being on your plot of land. And some people, that's just growing grass or growing... I went to Darmanada yesterday and they're trying to put 80% of the original trees back on the land. That you know, it takes more than 2 or 3 generations to see that through, but people have been there for 45 years and they can see 45 years worth of work. And that's going back to Mother Nature's time frame. So if you also think whenever you're going to plant a food, it might be for someone 7 generations away from you right now. Because some of these things like the bunya nut takes 25 years to give you a first lot of nuts. Most people don't hang around the same spot to get the fruits of their labour. So you've got to be, what would you call that? Just giving, just do it for the sake of doing it and not for yourself. That's my 2 cents worth, sorry.
All right. And I was wondering if any of you have a question. Yep. Yep.
Well, I'll explain why I'm asking it. My friend is in India, his ashram. I'm trying to help him, and but I'm not skilled, and it would take me a lifetime of Google searches. So I was just wondering, is anyone up for a paid consultation where I can just sit down for an hour and discuss things I need help with, because the land's degraded, they're using pesticides.
Okay. Look, there are excellent people in India. There are thousands of incredibly skilled, competent permaculture designers and teachers in India. And just search Permaculture India and get onto them. Okay? Yep. Any other questions? Yep.
One from me. Oh. Can I ask one first?
Oh,
Devil's figs. What are we going to do about them?
Devil's figs? Oh, God. Yeah, get them when they're small. Just keep your eyes peeled, observe, interact. You've just got to get them when you're
They're
small.
out of control,
Yep.
though, totally.
Yep, yep. Pull them out by the roots, yep, and burn them. Well, when they get them as small as you can, a pair of leather gloves. I have a spare leather glove that I wrap around it and then get it out early. And if they, they're sneaky, sometimes they'll come up under other things and disguise themselves. And then, while you see them, get a prong. A prong is a fantastic tool. It's as thick and strong as a crowbar, but it's only this tall. It's got a D handle on it. It's got a thing at the back. And it's really easy to push in the ground and lever back to get those woody weeds out of the ground. So look out for it. The prong, P-R-O-N-G. That's the best tool for those woody weeds. Now, yep.
Thank you. Look, I apologise that some of this might not be very popular, but an abiding question for me. I just want to mention I do make tools, and if anyone wants to talk to me afterwards about making tools, especially from scrap, please come and talk to me afterwards. My conflict is as a volunteer, I do a lot of bush regeneration, not in New South Wales. And I make tools for people who do bush regeneration and people who do weeding. My conflict is that a lot of the plants, and I did discuss it with Bill at one time, a couple of times, my conflict with the permaculture practice is very much that permaculturists often introduce what I would call weeds into certain areas, and that they have an inherent capability of spreading. And I've been a seed collector for food plants, especially vegetables, for quite a while. And it's fair to say that I avoid anything that may become weedy.
Yeah, we can...
May well have been responsible for spreading some weeds in the time we've run Seed Savers, which for those who've just arrived, it was from 1985. In all conscience, one has to think of one's lifespan and say, what have I imbibed? What have I taken in? Have I drunk coffee? Yep, I've drunk some coffee. Should I plant coffee? Well, it's a weed, as is agreed by the bush regenerators, as is passion fruit, chili, and many other things that I actually like and I actually drink or eat. So that is where this sort of conflict thing means that you think, what's the ideal? We should only grow natives. We should be fascistic about any plant from elsewhere, even from outside this area. We should not take boat plants on. We won't accept any refugee plants here because we are pure. Or will I actually grow the coffee, passion fruit, chilies, and so on, with the possibility that they will go and contaminate the pure, beautiful bushland that we white people and Aboriginal people hold so dear. So we're all in this sort of moral conundrum, yeah? We all go, well, what am I going to do with my life? Am I only going to grow, bush foods, or am I going to actually face the music, which is I drink coffee, I drink passion fruit drink down there, and I eat chilies every day.
Okay, Jude, it's not only permaculture. Everybody who is a gardener, every nursery person, every nursery, every agriculturalist, every horticulturalist they have spread more weeds than permaculturists. And so it's really, and then look, it's very contextual. Things that are a shocking weed in Tasmania, you've got to nurture them, you know, here to keep them alive. And so a weed in, what's a weed in one place just can't become a weed in another place. When I teach, I take the precautionary principle and, you know, observe and interact. If you're bringing something new into an area, observe. I mean, I planted some ice cream beans when I started off. And once I saw how they could self-sow, and then the fruit bats loved them, I just started chopping them back.
Yep.
Now, look, I've still got some popping up, and look, I haven't let one go to seed for more than 20 years. But there's still that seed stock in the ground, and so we make sure we chop them back whenever we see any of them emerging. And so, you know, you've got to sort of take a degree of responsibility for these things. But it's not just, I mean, permaculture didn't introduce devil fig. You know, there's a lot of weeds that, you know, we do not use at all. And I think it really depends on the context, where you are, what your environment is, and I think we're also at a point where we really need to protect what we've got. We've got to, you know, we've got to stop logging native forests. I mean, absolutely, for the sake of the planet, for the sake of the future. They're our greatest carbon stores and stores of biodiversity. But on degraded land, we've got to get, you know, carbon sequestered, we've got to get life happening, we've got to get biodiversity happening. Everything works both ways. And, you know, camphor laurel has actually meant the survival of a number of native butterflies to the big scrub, and some of the wood pigeons, because there was a native laurel in those forests which is virtually now extinct. So we've, you know, got to look at the big picture of things. I think one of the issues with a lot of regen work is that we're trying to push the clock back and stop the ecological clock. The ecological clock is constantly moving forward and adapting and changing. And we're trying to achieve in a year or two what nature would take 100 years or more to achieve. And so we're very impatient. I think we just need to slow down with some things, protect what we've got, and be more strategic. I'm a great believer in ecological restoration. And no matter what our systems are, we want to bring in our native plants. We want to have our bush foods. We need to harvest our bush foods and eat them. I mean, that's at the heart of reconciliation, isn't it? Of living in this country is growing and eating the foods of this country, but we cannot live on them entirely. We still need our other foods. Otherwise, you know, we've just got to decimate the population, and that's not on the agenda. So, yeah, weeds is a great thing to bring up, and thanks for the opportunity for just giving a couple of perspectives.
Anybody else got a question?
You mentioned Soteria before, and we've got half a lot of land that's, you know, pretty good canopy, and the other half is pasture. And it's Soteria, and you said put cardboard on the Soteria. Do you have any other tricks? Planting other plants in all of that is hopeless because they just don't get any sun, they just get drowned out.
Have you got much acreage or just a garden?
There's about 50 acres of pasture.
And you
So
want
part
to
of me thinks about starting at the edges and just working my way out. I don't know.
So do you want to turn the pasture into an agricultural crop, or just get rid of the Soteria?
We'll leave some pasture, but I want a bush regen. I want to put some trees in there, even for the cows even, but nothing grows in there.
Cows are good, but cows are also cloven hoof animals, and so they compress the soil a lot. There's a couple of ways, a couple of things you can do. One is goats. They'll knock about all the weeds and the grasses that are in there, but you just got to house them fairly carefully, and they're a bit difficult. Pigs, they're a good option. Just one single low electric fence wire, and pigs are really strong and tough enough to look after themselves in the against wild dogs and things. So there are a couple of things you can do if you're looking at acreages, and you can get pigs pretty cheaply around here. There's a guy who specialises in renting out or selling you his pigs, and he's done a lot of regeneration work up in the forest up around Barker's Vale, and that's worked really well for him. So that's a couple of clues. Cultivation, if you cultivate it and keep slashing it, and you and if you can put leguminous crops in there, they'll start adding nitrogen to the soil, and Soteria doesn't seem to need much energy in the soil. It'll grow on really crap ground, which is the problems that we used to have with it. Shading it out. Once you get your forestry cover up, it'll tend to, really knock it down. We've got a couple of hectares of bamboo, and it was a solid Soteria forest once. Now nothing grows there except a bamboo, and bamboo's good so long as it's not the running bamboo. You stay right away from that. Bamboo has lots of silica in the leaf matter, and it does really good stuff for the soil. So not quite sure what else I can say except graze it off wisely, cultivate the soil if you can turn it, and keep turning it until you start to break up the root matter, and get your bush and tree cover onto it as soon as you can.
Hello. As you've got quite a large area, I would restrict my first steps to creating edges. So permaculture-wise, which you can easily read up, is to do some earthworks that disturb the soil, and that's your golden opportunity, and you must not waste it, because beforehand you will have collected all the seeds and other planting material to absolutely overplant that edge and get a little sort of ingress into your place. A start, Don't say I'm going to do all of this. Just start with one little furrow or big furrow. Yeah. And you asked before about what were the first steps. I think a lot of curiosity helps, to start a garden or a farm. And a lot of reading really helps. We don't do research anymore. It's such a besmirched word. We just read. Do your research. Also talk with your neighbours a lot, and like-minded people in the street and at markets, and find out what they do, what they grow, and how they grow it, and when they pick it, and what's a weed, and so on. This is pretty obvious stuff, but that's what we did. We did a lot of chatting at markets and buying plants at markets too. So, and we still do. Oh, I was going to mention something too about fungi. Michelle and I eat 5 species of fungi, and he's from an area where the family ate 12. A lot of people in Australia, most white Australians, mistrust fungi, and to the point where Gardening Australia won't do a segment on it because Australians are not ready. I think we're getting there. A really important thing with identifying fungi is to know the relatives that look similar but are toxic or not non-comestible. So the 5 fungi that we've come to have been done through a lot of reading and a lot of talking with people, local people who know them, so that we're not making mistakes. And we take a tiny little bit like the size of a rice grain and rub it on the inside of your wrist, and then another bit sort of on the side of your lip. I'm not suggesting this for any fungus in particular, but and then you take tiny dosages so that you're absolutely certain. We did that with pleurotus, oyster mushroom, which grows endemically around here. It grows on dead wood, and a lot of fungi spores of this area are of saporific types of fungi, meaning that they eat dead wood. So what we've done in our garden of 1 acre is put lots of logs. So we have a friend who cuts down trees and he provides us with logs. And we found that particularly palm logs naturally grow oyster mushroom. And also leguminous like coral tree and other soft-wooded timbers. And however, the hardwoods are really good for reishi. We did try and grow lion's mane, but we only got a few actually come. But reishi did really well on really like mango logs. So we create a permaculture style effect throughout the orchard with logs. It's not a tidy orchard. It's not a lawn with trees in it. It's like a forest, fallen timber. And now we've got the legumes that we're cutting and chopping, and they're becoming the logs for the fungi.
We never recommend anyone to eat mushrooms wild, just because there's not enough knowledge in the community for that. When you pick a mushroom, you just go in Europe to the pharmacist, and if he doesn't know, he ring another pharmacist and work out what the mushroom is. And that's people that are picking mushroom very regularly wild, and that's the thing we're talking about. I could frighten you, maybe I should, about eating wild mushroom, not to do that. For example, don't do it.
I'm going to come back very briefly to biological charcoal. Tomorrow, is it, or Thursday? Tomorrow, we have a 20-seat bus which can take you to Misty Mountain to Dolph's cannabis plantation. There's not much cannabis growing there. 9:30 here. Can take 20 people up to his place and you'll see exactly how to make the best biochar in the world for free, basically. It doesn't require expensive equipment at all. Something Adolph has managed to develop, is a very cheap way of making good quality charcoal, and you've been hearing how beneficial that can be. So if anyone's interested to do this tour, please be here at 9:30 tomorrow morning.
And maybe put your names down somewhere with me or something like that so we know how many people. We've got a 24-season bus, but we could take quite a number of people.
Do you want to say something? You want to say? Yes.
Mushrooms. Come on, you guys. Okay, town of Nimbin has hundreds of psychonauts walking around. You got a mushroom plantation, you grab one of those kiddies and say, here, eat these. If they don't survive, you got free fertiliser. That's the worst. If they do survive, they telepathically call all their mates and you've got 500 woofers the very next day. It's all a joke, but I have... part of our organisation is to eat well, so we've created a plant-based restaurant in Murwillumbah called the Blue Meanie. So we bought the Blue Frog and we thought we'd keep some of the name, and then my wife loves mushrooms and that's sort of things we dish out as well, and then she found out Blue Meanie. The stupid council rings her up and says, do you know you can't offer psilocybin mushrooms to your clients? And my wife, being American, just yelled back at him, is this what you ask all vegan restaurants that come to your town? I'm going to put it in the paper. Then they sent one, everything we talk about, you can't talk about, we'll take you to court. It's like retards on steroids. If something out in your garden is meant to kill you, it will kill you. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's that simple. Now, you can be wrapped up in cotton wool and go, I'll take a few psychonauts. What are those mushrooms like? Blah, blah, blah. Mushrooms are good for vegetarians. It has B12. It has things that they don't really get because they don't eat other things that have B12 and stuff like that in it. But for self-preservation, which we all have ingrained in us because of the shit we watch on TV, then you wouldn't want to go out and do something that you don't know about. Into the Wild was a film like that. And this guy went off and he did really good and he had his book. And he just failed to look at the last mushroom and, sorry to wreck that one for you, but it was a fabulous heart feeling. Just stay observant, ask people. You've got a community out here, like they said, 100 years of information between us all. There's thousands of people out in the streets. There's 40, 50, 60 communities of like-minded people right throughout this area. And this is just us, you know. There's definitely people in Sydney and Perth. There's definitely people that know this sort of stuff. And then you got Dr. Google. So don't be afraid of mushrooms. You know, last idea was if you do find a good psychedelic mushroom and you decide to munch on it, then have a mantra in your head that says, "Dear mushroom goddess, please teach me everything I need to know about mushrooms while I slip into this psychedelic coma." And you might come out a better person, you might not. But, you know, just be real about food, real about where you live, real about what you want to do. There's always someone who's going to help you. You know, you're not alone. You're not a lone ranger.
If you're here on Wednesday, we have a fantastic farmers market just here next to the church, and there's a couple there that produce an amazing variety of beautiful mushrooms, lion made and shiitake and other very difficult things to grow, some lovely Korean mushrooms. And what they don't know about edible mushrooms is nobody's business, apart from the fact that they're reasonably priced, they're delicious, they know how to cook them, and they'd be full of advice for you. And mushroom is one of the greatest protein sources and vegetarian foods you can eat. So, yeah, what Jude said about under your armpits, you know, and the soft tissues around your body, very good way to test it. And they taught me that as well. Not that I've had to use it, but that was what they said to us. So that'll carry the mushroom conversation a bit further. Robin?
One of the things that we haven't touched on is tools. And I love my hand tools. And we've got a wonderful person coming on Saturday for our homesteading open day at Janbung Gardens, Richard McKiernan. He lives down Nana Glen. No bananas there, I don't think. Anyway, he's coming up with a whole collection of his tools. He'll be teaching how to care for your tools, sharpen them and stuff, but he's also going to be giving a workshop on how to use a scythe and the ancient art of scything. Yeah. So I've got a scythe. I learnt to use it when I was in Bavaria, and I got a couple of snaths and blades. But yeah, it's just amazing what can be done with simple hand tools. And I think, you know, one of the things that I think we're shying away from too much is talking about where we're heading and what's happening with climate. We are facing bigger and bigger weather extremes and events. There is a massive El Nino starting to develop in the Pacific. Over the next couple of years, we're looking at sort of 2019 eat your heart out stuff. That's what the indications are. We've come through a couple of blissful years of La Nina and cooler, wetter weather, tempered by a massive volcano eruption that happened in January last year that cooled our temperatures here in the southern hemisphere by 3 to 5 degrees. That's starting to dissipate. We really need to be preparing for disastrous events. Extreme heat waves, we've come through extreme floods, we've come through fires in forests, you know, in 2019, the forest fires up on Mount Nardi. And we as individuals and communities have to prepare ourselves to survive these events. And who was here after the flood last year? There was no internet, there was no mobile phone service, there was the only information that you could get, there were no roads, you couldn't get in or out, nothing could get in or out. It was only via radio and, possibly television that you could get any news. In town here, there was no electricity. No, cards wouldn't work. People talk about a cashless economy. What a joke. What do we do in a disaster when cash is king? Yeah, and we need to look at resilience and the ability to survive on a community level. It's more than just, your individual, what do you call it, those survival freaks that go and build themselves bunkers and got 3 years food supply in it. No, that's, preppers, yeah. But we all need to sort of prep to a degree. But it's on that community level and just being really real about what we are facing. Because I think there's still a lot of soft denial around. If you really want to get a handle on what we're facing, read Linda Woodrow's book, 470. They're selling it over in the Environment Centre. We've also got copies down at Janbung Gardens. Linda's a local lady from Kyogle. She wrote the permaculture home garden book. But she went to uni in recent years and did a degree in climate science communications and realised that people just aren't really getting it in terms of what we face, what we need to prepare for. And so she's written what's called a cli-fi, a climate fiction. It is a great read. It's a brilliant story, fantastic characters. It's actually set in the Northern Rivers, sort of mainly Mullumbimby. But the scenarios in that book are what is predicted for when we hit 470 parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere. We are now at 420. A couple of years ago, we were at 400, okay? Where the science is going wrong is it's being too conservative. We're hitting worst-case scenarios much faster and much earlier than expected. So it's really time that we got real. I mean, it's important to have hope, but hope is gained through action, through positive action to address real issues. And I'd really like to see conversations starting to look a lot more realistically at how we're going to get through the coming decades and, the consequences for our kids and our grandkids.
Anyone got any more questions?
It seems like we're pretty much finished here, but if there's anybody wants to deal with anything in relation to some more technical aspects around growing stuff or whatever, we'll be open for conversations later. I think we're still a bit ahead of time here, are we? No? Good on you, mate.
Hey guys, the internet is a good thing. I'd just like to give Weedy a plug because, my missus is like, she shows me every episode he comes out with, and it's awesome information, but it's mind-blowing visuals. It's stuff like you couldn't put together. You have to be a friggin' photographer to make some of the stuff he does, but it makes it so simple and it makes you so passionate to want to do it yourself. So it's like, super easy to find on YouTube. Just chuck in Weedy Garden and, my two Bobworth.
I can say cut or do it again and take two. I can say take two and I can say cut and stuff. I'm not very good doing the live shows. I've never done a live show. This is like a live show. What? Oh, okay, this is live now. Take two. No, sorry. Thanks for the plug. Yeah.
I'll plug our YouTube channel on which you'll find 1,600 films, which we've made in mostly our garden, half in our garden and half in other places, sometimes Lombok or Afghanistan or wherever. And we've divided it into about 50 playlists. We've stopped doing that a few years ago now, so we just did it sort of for like 7 or 8 years. But anyway, so you can look for specific topics within it, including fungi. So that's youtube.com/seedsavers.
Thank you.
Also, our website has seedsavers.net, has lots. It has 2 free books that Michelle's talked about at the beginning as PDFs that you can download on how to put in a seed-to-seed food garden in schools, but it could be anywhere. It could be your garden. And how to run a local seed network, which is the idea of which is to have local seeds rotating around within the area, not to be travelling across Australia. Local adaptations.
I just want to share with you one tiny little story of hope before we go. I told you about how our farm was when we bought it. Not a tree, virtually no trees, no grass, no fertility. Grass didn't grow for 4 years. Hell, what the stuff have we done buying this, and what are we going to do? Well, we didn't do much until 1996 when we put in our bush food orchard, and we started doing all the things that Paul said to prepare. But basically, when we did that, we'd always felt kind of uncomfortable vibes at our place, and it felt like we weren't doing the right thing. We weren't quite sure if it was the old lady who was the cow farmer who had to pick grass seed to survive and sold grass seed to just get by. We didn't know if it was her or the original Aboriginal ancestors that also had been there, but we didn't really know much about that. Anyway, when we started to do all those hard yards that Paul said in our bush farm to get it started, Aboriginal artefacts came into our hands everywhere. Everywhere we dug up some amazing Aboriginal axe or tool or ochre or whatever. And I'm just saying this because when you start doing the right thing, you definitely get gifts, you definitely get encouragement, and you definitely see a way forward that you maybe couldn't see, and just step by step you get there if you just keep going and trust. So good gardening, everybody, good farming, everybody. And I just want to tell one more thing, that Graham Sate is here. Please stand up, Graham. Graham is one of the most extraordinary people on this planet, I've got to say. He's going to be talking at 1:30, and he is the guru on soils, on agriculture. There is nothing Graham doesn't know. Help, assistant, health of soil. Please come and hear his talk, or you will really miss out on something extraordinary. It's at 1:30 here. And Misty Mountain tomorrow, if anybody wants to go up to Dolph's Farm, that's at 9:30 tomorrow, and it'll be pretty much all day up there learning how to make biochar. And so if anyone wants to do that, please come and see me and we'll put your name down. Thank you very much for coming. Oh, the apothecary's got some. Yeah. Thank you all very much for being here.